Cuba, 1962, the threat of nuclear war looming over every American. Khrushchev and Kennedy, eyeball to eyeball in the desperate struggle over nuclear weapons and the threat they pose. This is the Cuban Missile Crisis. During this 13-day period, President Kennedy took a stand against Premier Khrushchev in an effort to protect Americans, decrease nuclear weapons, and maintain the international standing of the United States of America. Flashback to before the Soviet missiles were transported into Cuba, back when the United States did the exact same thing. In 1959, a deal was made with the leaders of Turkey, where they would store U.S. missiles for the purpose of firing at Russia if needed. In retrospect, this wasn't the best idea, for it almost meant a nuclear war 3 years later. August 29th, Soviet surface-to-air missiles were spotted in Cuba, possibly operational. On October 9th, President John F. Kennedy personally authorized a U-2 spy plane flight over part of Cuba. He wanted to find the purpose of these missiles and observe any military activity. Bad weather delayed the flight until the 14th of October. Photographs from the plane proved there were Soviet missile bases being constructed. Kennedy was deeply angered with Premier Khrushchev's actions, but was surprised as well by his boldness. The Soviets organized a fleet of 85 ships, 50,000 men, and 230,000 tons of equipment. On August 25th, the Omsk became the first of these vessels to sail to Cuba. By October 20th, over 40,000 troops had entered. What explains Khrushchev's actions? Perhaps Khrushchev thought Americans were too scared to react because of the risk of nuclear war. He could do anything, and the Americans would simply get cold feet and stand aside. Others surmised it was a sort of trap. If the U.S. responded to the Soviets' actions, other nations would become upset at their aggression towards a country as small as Cuba. Or maybe Khrushchev wanted to be close enough to fire on the U.S. without the Americans' missile warning system having enough time to kick in. Every idiot can start a war, but it is impossible to win this war with nuclear weapons. Therefore, these missiles are to scare them, to restrain them, and give them back some of their own medicine. Nikita Khrushchev. On October 22nd, President John F. Kennedy announced on live television that U-2 spy planes had confirmed the existence of Soviet missile bases in Cuba. Kennedy ordered a blockade. No Soviet ships would be allowed to pass through. The blockade began the very next day.
My job was quartermaster. So quartermaster is someone who's on the bridge. So I was there with the captain, the commanders, and was kind of hearing what was going on, from the bridge. So it wasn't like being on the deck or being on the guns. It was like really kind of being in the operations center. Well, we actually were in the area as a part of our regular training. And as it turned out, while the crisis, was underway, we were sent from, we usually were in Bermuda or someplace doing ocean patrols, and we were sent to Guantanamo Bay to be a part of the blockade. Ships were coming in and past our ship. We stopped them, asked where they were coming from, what they were carrying, and actually, in some cases, I think you'll have a photo of the ship. It has guns, so to speak. It's not as big as a Navy ship. It's about 255 feet long. So at one point we were training our guns on some tanker which we were stopping, and our captain immediately was like, please get the guns off the ship. Didn't want to create some kind of crisis. Well, it was kind of scary. I mean, the idea was that, as little kids, I don't know that you guys ever did this, but we were always trained to, we'd have, these not trainings, but these little drills for when the bomb dropped, we were going to duck under our desk and hide our head, which we later found out was totally useless.
All ships from the blockade, excluding the Bucharest, a tanker, either slowed or altered course. On the 25th, USS Essex and USS Gearing attempted to stop the Bucharest from crossing the blockade line. The tanker would not stop, though, and crossed the blockade. The same day, the United States went to DEFCON 2.
So my father was invited with other Tennessee newsmen in October of 1962 to go on a tour of Guantanamo Bay by the U.S. Navy. So it was exciting. That was something he looked forward to, and of his colleagues were going with him. And so they left, I guess the 20th, maybe 19th of October, sometime around then. And it was just going to be a kind of an adventure, a tour of a naval base that we had. And then
Then the announcement of the blockade came out.
right. Well, actually, my mother got a call from the U.S. Navy, the Department of the Navy, saying that we would not be hearing from my father for a while. They didn't know how long, and but they wouldn't tell us anything else. That he was in the Caribbean, he was on the ship, and that's all we knew. And at the time, as a 15-year-old, I have to say I wasn't paying that close attention to world affairs. I was, probably more concerned about the Friday night football game and that sort of thing. But, we knew there was trouble with Cuba, but didn't realize that things were going to be that bad. But then suddenly we got word that he was, we weren't going to hear from him. And then the president went on television on Sunday night. And President Kennedy gave a very long speech about what was happening.
The whole world was on edge, waiting to see if this conflict would result in Armageddon. The lives of 100 million Americans were at stake, and the lives of Cuban citizens as well. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, were you able to speak with your family in Cuba?
It was very hard to do. I would listen to the conversations and everything, so you had to be very careful what you would say, so it wouldn't implicate the people there with something that they didn't do. Well, I was concerned because if there had been a war, I had family there, my mother, my father. I used to work with my father on his business, in his real estate business, which ended when Fidel Castro went in. They just took everything. Yes, my father didn't want to leave. He always said, this is the house I was born in, and I'm not going to leave it. I'm going to stay here. He didn't want to leave.
The conflict's only casualty occurred when a U-2 plane was shot down while flying over Cuba, and the 35-year-old pilot, Rudolph Anderson, was killed. Kennedy ordered that the U.S. not respond unless more planes were fired upon. That same day, Alexander Fomin proposed a possible resolution. The Soviets would withdraw their missiles from Cuba if the Americans agreed not to invade in turn. Additionally, Khrushchev demanded the removal of American missiles from Turkey. The blockade officially ended on the 21st of November. The crisis was over.
Here I was sitting in Washington, D.C., where Kennedy was the president. And it was in that interim period when they had acknowledged that there were missiles coming. We knew where they were going. And here we were right in the middle of this very frightening time, not knowing what the outcome was going to be. And there was the Leningrad, of all orchestras, Philharmonic, sitting there in Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C., playing for us. It was a beautiful concert. I remember absolutely nothing about the concert itself. But here's the significant thing. When the concert was over, there was a standing ovation, a booming standing ovation of, I don't even know how long that was. And when an orchestra plays or when musicians play and they get a standing ovation, that's a wonderful thing. But this went on for a very, very long, minutes and minutes and minutes ticked by. There was a feeling of such mutual love from the Americans to the Russians on stage.
The people are still the same.
That's right. They still have families, they have children that they love. Even Sting wrote a song, if you know that one. I hope the Russians love their children too. And of course they do. Nobody wants war. Nobody wants to see their families annihilated. Yes, so there's that common factor of just being a human being.